Okay, we're going to start our next session. It's okay the first time, but next time it's got to leave. I think our next speaker needs no introduction in this community. We've got Kim van Wyk speaking on the topic of "You Not Your Code: Unsolicited Advice from a No Longer New Developer." I don't think it's that unsolicited. Looking forward to this one.
Thank you. Right, thank you everyone. First check, kind of that's good audio-wise? Okay. I have managed to repair the glasses, which fell apart on me about 20 minutes ago, so there's one arm, so if my glasses fall off and I can no longer see you, we'll have to take a break. My apologies. My talk today is basically a collection of things that I've learned from 20 years of hard-won experience, and I'm aiming it mainly at people who are a bit newer in this. So if I could ask just from a show of hands, who among us is currently learning software development, or at least has just graduated? Anyone? Okay, perfect. Beyond that, anyone with, say, let's say 3 to 4 years experience? Give or take, 3, 4, 5 years experience? Okay, perfect, thank you. And the rest of my audience are grey-bearded people like me. Okay, cool. Start with the topic. It's a little bit clickbaity, but when I say you are not your code, what I mean is there is a lot more to you, the person, you, the software developer, than the code you write. And what makes that important is a very fundamental part of software development is you will write some code, you will think this is great, brilliant, it fixes the problem, it does everything I'm supposed to. You send it for code review, and you couple of times you get code reviewed, you get a reply that says, this is wrong, or maybe you should consider this, or have you thought about this aspect? And you start thinking, oh shoot, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I must be a bad software developer. That's not what code review is about. Code review is to make sure that we're all considering the right ways to do it. I have done this for long enough that I've seen a whole bunch of things, and I've fixed a whole bunch of bugs that I wish I didn't have to. And I've made a whole bunch of mistakes, and I've corrected myself, and I've learned a whole bunch of experience. And a lot of the people giving you that kind of code review advice have done the same. No one in a code review, at least no one kind of not psychopathic, is saying to you that your code is wrong, therefore you're a bad writer, you're a bad developer, you're a bad human. All they're saying is, we could have done this thing slightly differently. It can be easy to think like, well, you know, I know what I did for this problem, I shouldn't be learning anything from the code review, what's the point? Take yourself a challenge. Go back and look at a piece of code you wrote a year ago, 2 years ago. Find the oldest piece of code you've still got. Sit down and look at that as if you were reviewing it. You will be guaranteed to find a whole bunch of stuff that you would say to the person who wrote it for review to say, maybe you should have looked at that. Have you thought about this? Your experience will tell you that actually 6 months later after you wrote that code, there was a bug that you didn't see coming. You can now look at the code review and say, well, that's what caused it. Did we think about this? Did you look at that? If you code review yourself, you'll quickly come to an appreciation that code review is not a punishment. Code review is not a means of saying, you, the developer, are bad at this. It's just a means of making sure all the code that we're working on collectively is as good as we can get it. Old and new do not map to bad and good. Marco had a phrase this morning that I'm going to borrow. When Marco gave his keynote this morning, he used the phrase, legacy is a 4-letter word to most software developers. That's certainly true to a certain degree, but legacy also means it's the stuff that works. Legacy doesn't necessarily mean bad, and legacy isn't really what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is when we sit down to look at new libraries, you want to do a new challenge, you've got to look at a new piece of code, you think, well, this new library is available, this must be it, because it's new, exciting. New to humans means cool and exciting and gripping and good to go. Old means boring and stale and, you know, why would we bother? But some of the best old stuff is still around. Django is 20 years old. CSS, which I picked as an example, jQuery, which is still, in my very limited front-end experience, an excellent way to do front-end querying, is still around. jQuery was invented roughly when I left university in 2005. jQuery is still around. There's been a whole bunch of stuff that have come and gone since then, the new, shiny, exciting things that everybody used. I don't mean to say new things are always bad. Many new things are very good. When Django was new, it was good. And if you used Django when it was new 20 years ago and you're still using it now, it's still good. It's probably better than it was 20 years ago because the good stuff gets improved. But it wasn't bad 20 years ago. But like everything else in life, you need a bit of moderation. It's very tempting to think, well, This code works and it's in, we use the requests library, for example, in our Python code. This code works, it's fine. But now there's a new shiny library available that does a little bit of AI when it does its web requests. I hope I've just made that up. I really hope that doesn't exist. But this new funky tool is available. It's available to you. We should use it immediately. Drop everything, we'll use it immediately. Then a month later, we find it's got a tragic bug and the AI is terribly wrong and it's deleted all our data. New doesn't necessarily have to be, we don't always have to chase new, is what I'm getting at. You want, in a professional environment certainly, you want boring. Boring is good. Boring is the thing that, and the last one I've got here, boring and reliable looks, well, boring until it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the system doesn't work, financial month end is tomorrow, the CEO has got your phone number somehow and is phoning you at 2 o'clock in the morning and saying, when will you have it fixed? Because we had this new front end that is brilliant and amazing and it looks fantastic, but right now it's a black screen and it doesn't work. If we went with the boring old one, it still worked at 2 in the morning, and you could arrive at work at 8 in the morning confident that it still worked from yesterday. So, boring and reliable, there are things to be said for it. I would say that. I personally am both boring and reliable, but I think that's a good thing to go with. Willie, Dave's question, how do I work at 2 in the morning? Not as well as I did when I was 20. This one is also a slightly important one, I think. What I've got saying here is favor human time over machine time. It is very, very tempting always to any level of developer you are, no matter what you do, to think that what you really need is efficiency. You need your code to be as literally efficient as possible. You want to squeeze every last bit of performance out of it. And to chase that, to take a random example, you have an example, you've got an input of 10 million numbers, and you process that in some way. You could have those 10 million numbers in a really large text file, 1 number per line. It's a really big file, and it takes forever to process. But forever to process in this context means it takes 6 seconds. Or you could pack it very tightly into super binary bits, and you've got 5 bits for the first number, and then 6 bits for the next number, and it's really tight, and it's a tiny file, and it can be processed super quickly. No one can read that, is the problem. You need, by the time you've figured out how to read the file because there's a problem, or how to read the code that parses those bits and then turns those into numbers and then processes those numbers, you've lost all the time you ever saved in efficiency. Debug for 10 minutes, debug for 20 minutes, debug for an hour, sometimes debug for a day. You've lost all the gains you've ever had, and you've lost all the gains you will ever have. There is something to be said for keeping it simple to read, favoring human time. Humans need time to understand things. The machine can be quick. The machine can possibly be quicker if you be efficient about it, but you can push it too far. And this is a really hard-fought piece of advice from my own career. I've spent a heck of a long time, particularly at factory levels when I was writing software that ran on your set-top box, your satellite decoder. You think that should be as fast as possible. So we go very binary packed, very binary everything. Then the customer contacts you and says, there's this bug here, and we need you to fix it urgently or we're not buying the product. Oh, shoot, okay, everyone goes scrambling. It took us 2 days to figure out what the heck the data looked like before we could begin to figure out why it didn't work. Whereas if it was a simpler format, we'd be on it immediately. YAML, JSON, TOML, I don't want to say XML. I don't want to recommend XML. CSV, thank you, that's far nicer an example. These are things that are big files, empty text, but they are so much easier to work with that you will save yourself so much time over a career, over a project, over a debugging period, versus doing it just with super compressed, tight binary files, that this is a piece of advice I really think is worth taking in. So I'm having to check time. I'm still going fine, I think. No, not that I think I'm out of time, just checking that I'm kind of on track. Yeah. Okay. Soft skills are every bit as important as development skills. Soft skills are arguably way more important than development skills. Lots of people can write software. I'm sure we all work with at least one of those people that you would not invite to the braai on the weekend. That's okay. Not everybody has to be sociable. You also work with the kind of people that you don't ever want to talk to because their responses are so nasty or so unpleasant and so forth, you just don't want to interact with them. I have worked with some of the very best engineers I've ever worked with. I have gone and sought advice from other people because I just don't want to talk to that guy. That's not helping anyone. Me as the junior developer in that time, I'm not getting the help I need. He is the senior guy, no one's ever coming to him, so presumably he's quite happy in his little bubble and he's working along, but that's not helping the company, not helping anybody really. This I borrowed from Robert Roscom, who's an excellent, I say technical lead architect, I think is what he does, but he writes on this kind of thing. And as he points out, 10x engineer, you hire your 10x engineer, he writes code 10 times as fast, he's 10 times better. But it never mentions any of that stuff. He doesn't mentor people, he doesn't write documentation, he doesn't make the system better for everybody else. That is the stuff that is important. At the bottom, I'm quoting, no amount of programming skill or perceived value justifies breaking Wheaton's law. When I say Wheaton's law, I mean Will Wheaton. If you're old enough, you remember Star Trek. He was the kid on Star Trek. If you're older than that, you remember Stand By Me. He was really an actual kid in Stand By Me. But in any event, he's an actor. I won't repeat because it would be recorded, but Wheaton's law, paraphrase, means be nice. It doesn't actually say that. What it says is don't be a, insert read word here. But there is no justification for not being a nice, easy person to get along with. Being good at what you do, being perceived as the expert and so forth, is not a justification to stop being a nice human. It really doesn't matter, frankly, what kind of education your colleagues have and what you have, unless you are a heart surgeon. Then I would like you all, please, to have a medical degree. In software, there are a lot of different ways to get here. I have a degree in electronic engineering. Several people I know have a degree in computer science. Lots of other people I work with don't have a degree at all. They went straight into the field. They went straight into the career. Some of them went to boot camps and so forth. If you looked at the code output or the quality of the work of any of those people, say, a year into working with you, do you know that they've got a degree or not? Makes no difference. The only thing it's ever really given me with an electronic engineering degree is that I can talk to other electronic engineers and kind of pretend I know what they're saying. That's the only thing it's ever meant for me. As I say, I've got the 5 best people I've ever worked with. 2 are self-taught, 2 have a degree in field, 1 is a pharmacologist. He studied pharmacology and he thought, I don't like this, and he went straight into software, and he's the best developer I've ever worked with. I'm just going to take a slight tangent here. The one important thing to remember for the rest of your business, and it might make a sense, can I ask how many of you are trained or training as engineers, specifically? Okay, a few. If I say to you, my engineering cohort, what the word trivial means, would you agree to me that the word trivial means we know how to do it? We don't have to learn anything new, but it says absolutely nothing about how long it'll take. Is that fair? Yeah. If I say to you, everybody who didn't study engineering, what the word trivial means, you don't think that. You think trivial means we can do it today. So when your engineering colleagues say to you, it's trivial, they could mean we can do it in 5 years, we don't have to figure out anything. What you hear them say is, it's easy, we'll do it today. There is a difference. But this is mainly me making fun of the engineers, which... Experience really matters, and experience matters for the simple reason that this stuff can take a while to figure it out. If you don't know how to do something, I keep having a look to turn at the screen here. You are not a bad developer. You are not an incompetent developer. It's not that you don't know what you're doing kind of broadly if you can't know how to do something immediately. You work with guys who you have some problem and you don't even understand the error. And they say, well, check bit C in the middle of that register, or make sure that we are properly compiled with the right flags, or maybe we make sure that when we're looping over the integer, we're looping over less than 255, we're not expecting a 256. I'm inserting bad examples from my own memory here. There are people who know these things. They can give you a suggestion for a tool you've never heard of, a library you've never seen. They can tell you how to solve a problem just from a weird, vague description. The business says it didn't work and it went green for 2 seconds before it stopped working. And they'll say, aha, go and fix it like this. And you're thinking, how the heck did you know that? It's all experience. It's all hard-fought experience. You get that knowledge by getting the pain the first time. If you don't have that experience, it just means you haven't had the opportunity to have that little bit of pain the first time to learn it. It doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It just means the other guys have had a bit more experience. A 20-year career or 30-year career or 10-year career and so forth is built up with a whole heap of different experiences. Sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. But that's how you figure out how to solve these things faster. It's not that you should magically know when the business says this weird thing has happened and your colleague says, oh, well, we fix it like this. It's tempting to sit and think, well, they must be much, much better than I am because I didn't know how to do that. No, they just had the experience. It's not a good or bad thing. Marco said this earlier as well. No, sorry, not Marco. Jeremy said this in our education session. This stuff is hard. It is okay for this to be difficult. it looks, as I think Jeremy again pointed out, if you watch a YouTube tutorial for someone saying, let's write this complicated system in 20 minutes, what you didn't see is the 10 days to 2 weeks that he took making that stuff work. He just showed you the good stuff. If you see somebody saying, we'll figure this problem out quickly, we all know how to do this simple, easy, that's because they spent 4 weeks learning it. It's simple, easy now. It wasn't simple, easy to them 4 weeks ago. Learning is hard. This stuff is hard. The stuff doesn't make any sense. If you've ever tried to speak to anybody who's not a software developer about what you do, you probably get a glazed look and a nice polite nodding. Yes, that's nice. Yes, what do you do? I get Christmas cards or birthday cards sometimes from my parents that says a running joke along the lines of, we're very proud of what you do. We don't know what it is, but we're very proud of what you do. It happens. Yeah, but this stuff is hard. It's not simple. We all make mistakes. Anybody, if I can ask my cohort of guys who've been working for more than, say, 5 years, have you ever deleted a production database? Of course you have. So have I. So has everyone. It happens to us all. It hurts, but we learn these things, and it's just a matter of experience. It's just a question of, and it was a painful mistake to make, but the stuff is hard. You know it's hard, we know it's hard, but it's sometimes tempting to, you get the thought thinking, shoot, I don't get this, I must be a bad developer. No, you're a good developer because you know you don't get it. The really bad developers are the ones who think they know everything and actually really know very little. Not everyone is going to be as coding as much as you might be. Now, I obviously don't know from my audience who kind of into coding, who isn't, but some people do this stuff for fun. You write it as a hobby, you write software, you come to conferences, etc. Some people don't. Some people arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning, they write their software, they leave at 5 o'clock at night, they go and play tennis, or they go and race their car, and they go and do whatever hobby it is they've got. It doesn't really make a difference to the quality of their work, frankly. If you are one of those people who does this stuff for fun, and I'm very much in that group, you can spend some of your time thinking, oh, I must be better a developer than these guys, because I spend all this time on it. It might mean you know more stuff. You've got a broader range of knowledge and so forth, but it doesn't necessarily mean your work is any better. And there is no reason to think that because some people leave at 5 and didn't pick up their computer until 8 o'clock tomorrow, that they're bad at this. It's just different. But it is worth keeping up with new stuff as you go. This is part of your job. Your employer may not make space for this, depends on your employer. You learn things as you go along. You learn about new techniques, you learn about new libraries, you learn about things that went wrong for somebody else that you shouldn't, perhaps not repeat the mistake yourself. It is worth keeping up with new stuff, whether or not you're into this or not. If you're into this, keeping up with it is easy. You just you listen to the right podcasts, you read the right blogs, it's happening anyhow. If you're not into this, you might need to make a bit of effort, but it is well worth it, career-wise, to figure out what's new. Sorry, I was wondering for the slide to change, and it did. I did want to make a quick, brief side note. If you are one of those people who write software for fun, which I do, I freely confess, I really enjoy writing code. When you get a job, you think to yourself, holy cow, they pay me to do this. I do this for free. They give me money to do the thing that I would do for fun. And that's great, and that's brilliant, and very, very few people get to do something for work day in, day out that they enjoy, that you actually like what you do. At some point, though, you'll have to do something you don't like doing. You're writing your coding job, you have to write the login page, or you have to parse through 10 terabytes of logs, or some part of your job is just not that interesting. And you might start thinking, do I enjoy this as much as I think? You almost certainly do, but there's a reason we have to pay you money to come to work. Other than the fact that obviously it's nice to eat food. But there's a reason we have to pay you money to come to work. Some of the stuff is boring. It doesn't mean... I can't answer for you, but it probably doesn't mean you're losing your joy. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, whatever. It's just some of the stuff isn't that exciting. But if you go and ask any of the other people in the business who don't write software, do you actually like what you do for a living? You'll be possibly shocked to discover very few people do. Most people come to work and work because, again, it's nice to eat food, but they don't like what they do. If you like what you do, even if you like 50% of it, if you like 20% of what you do, you're way ahead of many. And it's worth keeping that in mind. Other people's choices of language, editor, tools, they're different. They're not worse or wrong, necessarily. There are very few bad languages, to be honest. I could name a few, I will not. It's arguably said Python is the second best language at everything, and we are at a Python conference, and presumably we all write Python. There are excellent reasons why you might pick other languages for other tasks. I wrote C for many, many years. It did what I needed to do very well. I would not use it to parse through text documents or produce graphical GUIs, because I'd still be doing this 15 things. I'd still be doing this 5 years from now and trying to get it to work. Again, I wouldn't necessarily turn to the super fast Haskell code and have it run my web server. But the point I'm trying to get at is different tools and packages have different needs. They suit both different needs and different people's way of thinking. And what I'm trying to get at is it's too easy to get into the trap of thinking, well, I first learned Flask, therefore Flask is best, Django is rubbish. Or I first learned Postgres, what's this SQLite rubbish? It's clearly rubbish. There's one good answer, all the rest are rubbish. That's not true. That's never true. There's a whole bunch of different reasons to choose these things. Some of those reasons may not be very good, but there's a whole bunch of legitimate reasons to choose any number of legitimate tools. If you've ever seen any PHP, it's horrifying, but it works, and it meets the needs of the people who wrote the PHP. It can be very helpful to have a variety of tools in your toolbox. There's nothing wrong with knowing both Flask and Django, or HTTPX and requests. Similarly for your text editor, this is the thing you spend your time doing. You spend your day, presumably, typing into a piece of text editor, into a piece of software that turns your thoughts into code and the code runs. Whatever text editor you use, and I'm not going to say which one you should choose, learn it. Learn it well. It is the equivalent of a good toolbox full of tools. If you are just hunting and picking at your toolbox, you're not maybe that good a typist. That comes with time, but maybe invest some time in learning it. If you are clicking with the mouse every time you need to do something in your editor and there's actually a keyboard shortcut you should be using, or could be using, learn that. Get your editor. Your editor can do amazing things, but you are, fundamentally, you tell an editor what to do. You need to be good at that editor. I'll just leave that there. I've already touched on this, but I'm just going to quickly go through this as well. If you have no strong preference in editor, it's worth picking something and getting good at it. Whether that's VS Code, whether that's PyCharm, whether that's Vim or Emacs, which is obviously the correct choice, but I might be the only person in the room who thinks that. I know there's 2 people in the room. I know Jeremy also thinks that. There's 2 of us who think Emacs is the right choice. I'm not trying to sell you on an editor. I'm trying to sell you on learning the editor you use. Be that VS Code, be that PyCharm, be that whatever you use, it will have capacities in it to make you much better, much more effective, much faster, much less prone to think, holy cow, I've got to do this thing 10 times, it's going to be super boring. Your editor's got wings to help you with that. There are strong advantages, and I'm trying to emphasize this because I've worked with many, many colleagues who they see their editor as this thing that they don't really understand, and they open this file and they type into it, and then they say, oh, well, that didn't work, I'll have to repeat myself or delete the code and start again and so forth, and you are fighting your tools. Your editor is your primary tool. You need it to work for you. And don't be scared to change editors either. But maybe do that fairly sooner rather than later, because the more effort you invest in the one editor, obviously the less prone you are to want to change it. I'm only using Emacs now because I've got 20 years of memory in Emacs and nothing else works like Emacs does. Emacs isn't right for anyone else. Arguably it's not necessarily right for me, but it's what I now know how to use, and I can't use anything else. Okay, I'm going to speed up slightly. I think I must be running short on time, but I'm just going to point out 2 stories that I still got, no, we've got 10, 15, what? Oh, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Okay, well, call it 10, even if it's 5, we're heading towards the end. Okay, fair enough. Developers are not interchangeable. This is obvious when I say this to a room of people who are developers. This is not obvious if you say this to anybody who does not develop software, because we just look the same. Not physically, you know what I mean, but what we do looks the same. They wrote some code, something happened. Bob wrote some code, something happened. Frank wrote some code, something happened. Sepal wrote some code, something happened. Surely these guys are all the same, right? They've all got the same skills. But we all know that's not true. If you go down to your colleagues that are in accounting, they must know a whole bunch of stuff about accounting that you don't know, but they'll also, if you ask them, tell you that the financial accountant in the corner and the person who does the year-end accounting have very different sets of skills. We are not interchangeable. We look interchangeable, and it's kind of understandable why we look interchangeable, because nobody understands what we do. It's just black box. You fed in a request, code came out to the black box. Which of the developers is inside the black box surely doesn't matter. But I'm going to pick 2 kind of stories from my own career to point that out. I worked with a chap once who was literally the world expert in his field. Your DSTV satellite decoder, when it starts up, you put it in the smart card, and the smart card is responsible for decoding the content that comes over the air so that you can put it on screen. There's all sorts of security aspects. It's all encrypted 15 different ways. He was literally such an expert that the guys who make that system phoned him to ask questions about their system. He was that good. He worked for a week on a problem that I solved in 20 minutes. And that doesn't make me a better developer than him. Basically, he'd been asked to look at something that was outside his experience. We were developing some touchscreen system, and it was based on Linux, which he didn't know, and he could not calibrate it because he was firing up the Windows tool, he was firing up the GUI, and he couldn't find the right options, and he couldn't think what else to do. On the Linux box, the first thing I did was run the command line tool, which took the arguments that the GUI tool did not. Now, that's just experience. I know that, he doesn't. Doesn't make me a better developer. I refer you to World Expert comment. He literally is, and will always be, a far better developer than I am in that sphere. I just had some knowledge he didn't have. On the other hand, I inherited a piece of code from someone some years ago which parsed a really nasty-looking piece of XML. Customer changed their XML. I sat down to look at the code because he was no longer with us to make it work, and I literally did not understand it. I'm confident it was beautifully elegant and it was brilliant and it did everything in an excellent way. I was not smart enough, or no, that's not true. I didn't have the knowledge to make it right. So I rewrote it in Python. It took me 5 times as long. If we'd had him available, we could have done it better. We could have done it much faster. I don't think that makes me a lesser developer than him. It's just a set of experience. He knew some Node stuff. I didn't. So that's a little link to the slides will be available. I've just written on this particular topic at more length. The people who came before you, and Marco touched on this morning as well, was talking about legacy being a 4-letter word. Your predecessors were not idiots. The people who wrote software before you knew what they were doing. Okay, most of them. If there were weird decisions in your systems, almost always those weird decisions had an excellent reason for existing at the time. It's not that the people who chose them didn't know what they were doing, it's because that was a suitable answer at the time that they chose that thing. As an example, some third-party system in your system now takes a SOAP XML payload with 3-letter acronyms for all the elements. That's obviously awful to work with. It doesn't make any sense to anybody, but that's probably what existed at the time. Now the software has to work with that. Business requirements said, I need this tomorrow, or we can close the deal. You can do it right in 2 weeks, but then we won't close the deal. So of course they did it, and they delivered it tomorrow. Then, as much as you're developers, and you can put yourself in the same shoes, said, well, we'll go back and fix it later, there were other things to do. You know, there's always other things to do. So these decisions are made in good faith for good reason. It doesn't mean that they're idiots, doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. And this is maybe an important one, and it's kind of hard to necessarily think about if you're maybe a little bit younger in your career. The stuff that was done 15 years ago was done that way because then it was how it was done, or even possibly the only way to do it. And I use the example here, if you think maybe we should have a document database, a NoSQL database, that's cool, and it would make a lot of sense. When they designed that system 15 years ago, NoSQL didn't mean anything. Nobody knew anything about MongoDB. You had relational databases, and you had flat files. Pick one. This was your choice. Somebody asked me last time I gave one of these talks at PyCon, I'm reminded as an example, I'd spoken about the infrastructure at my employer, and we was all on-prem, it was all a big complicated on-premise system, and he said to me, why did you guys not go to cloud? Because when we started designing it 15 years ago, cloud meant a computer in the plane when it took off. There was no cloud, you know, but it's obvious, it's easy to think that what's available now is what's always been available. And of course that's not true. And it doesn't mean the decisions made then were bad, just that they were decisions we had to make at the time. I'm going to insert 2 grey-beard electronic engineering stories here. It's some personal career things just to note. When I joined my employer, the guys who made the satellite decoders in 2005, there was a serious debate going on about how we were going to squeeze the code to get 512 more bytes of storage. I don't mean kilobytes, I don't mean megabytes, I mean bytes. 512 individual bytes. If I come to you today and said, I'm worried about 512 bytes, you're thinking, why? We've got a terabyte, what does it matter? But at the time, 8 kilobytes of flash was the best you could get without spending a fortune. So 8 kilobytes of flash, 512 is a 16th of that. And we needed another 512 all of a sudden. That's really hard. But if I tell you that now, you think, what on earth are you talking about? Why would 512 bytes ever matter? Similarly, when I joined the company, we compiled all our C code. It took about 20 minutes. It took another 20 minutes to download over RS, details don't matter, but to download onto the decoder. So if I made a change, I was probably in for 40 minutes of waiting before I could test it. So I read everything 10 times, you check it. Yeah, are my semicolons in place? No, really, are my semicolons in place? Go down to another, come back, are my semicolons in place? Okay. Because you commit to 40 minutes. Maybe you'll get 6 of those a day to test your changes. When I left, still set-top boxes, everything was done immediately in the memory. There was a little business you plugged into the box and you said, run this code now. And it just ran. 2 seconds. That means the junior colleagues when I left were not reading everything very carefully. Well, not that they were being careless, but I mean they weren't taking 10 minutes to very, very carefully read anything because it didn't matter. If it didn't work, it wouldn't work, and then you go back. I still do that because that's now in the back of my brain that you need to do. And I don't mean to say that my technique is better, their technique is worse. I just mean to say it's different. We're trained in different ways. We learn different things. We are impacted by different experiences. But when it took me, and when I read everything and took 10 minutes to read everything, and today the guy writing the code doesn't have to do that, that doesn't mean I was an idiot 20 years ago. It's just what you had to do. I may well have been an idiot 20 years ago, but for different reasons. If you can improve it, do, please. But do your predecessors the honor of assuming that they knew what they were doing. Just like 10 years from now, somebody joins the company, you've long moved on, you don't want them thinking, what the hell was wrong with this moron? You want them assuming you knew what you were doing. The same is true of the guys who wrote the code 20 years ago. So I'm just going to skip ahead quickly to see what else I've got. Okay, just a few more things. We touched briefly on this earlier in the day in other places. Techniques, frankly, are more important than tools. It's more useful knowing how to write some SQL than knowing to be an exact expert on Microsoft SQL Server, unless you are a DBA, in which case, please, be an expert in Microsoft SQL Server. Good knowledge of the moving part of the website over knowing exactly how to write it specifically in Flask. Technique over tool is the way to go. You can find a lot of places. It's handy being a generalist, really, is what I'm saying. And the last major point that I wanted to make, and this is maybe a difficult thing to take in, the business you work for actually doesn't give a damn what you do in terms of how you do it. It's quite easy, the business has got a problem, they come and the developers say, okay, well, we know what the problem is, we can fix it. That's what they want to know. What will it cost, how long it'll take, can it be fixed? If it can't be fixed, what do we do instead? What's tempting is to tell them, well, the problem is that the major database is down because it wasn't being sharded correctly, so we need to have another cluster spun up so we can do more read-bound iterations, and then we need to get slightly better, different kind of solid-state drives. And the business people are saying, okay, cool. What I want to know is, can it be fixed and how long it'll take? It's too easy as a developer to assume, well, not assume, but to fall into technical mode when you're talking to the non-technical people, to just kind of over-explain, to say, these are all the really cool things we're talking about. There's a space for that. Your other fellow developers, either junior, senior, otherwise, will happily spend all day talking cool technical details with you, and you'll find your senior guys have got massive experience in something you've possibly never heard of, but they're not the business. The business wants to know, how do you fix it? That's what they care about. It is very difficult. It's very easy to alienate. Well, alienate's not quite the right word. It's very easy to come across to the business as a little bit clueless if you spend all your time talking about the problem and how you're going to solve it technically, than just that, I get it, we'll do this, it'll take us 2 days, we think we understand. Here's my example. If you say to the business, we're migrating from an MS SQL relational database to a MongoDB NoSQL document database, with the system is IO bound on reads and we need to be able to dynamically scale our cluster. Every word there makes sense to us. The business guys have no idea what that means. What you want to tell them is, our current database no longer efficiently suits the rest of the system, we need to change databases to keep up with performance. That's what they care about. Why are we doing it? What will it cost? The first sentence I have said many, many times to people in the business, and basically it doesn't help. There is a strong skill, and it's one of the soft skills I'm holding back on, to being able to communicate, and there are 2 things to that aspect. Communicate with your colleagues is great. Communicate with the people you work with who are not your technical colleagues is also an important skill to cultivate. And this, I think, is my last point. Take an interest in other people's work. And this is just general, specific advice from me. It can't be both general and specific. This is general advice from me. You might find something you really enjoy. Somebody, maybe even a DBA. You sit down with one of your DBAs, you have no idea what the guys are doing, you find, actually, this is really cool, I like this. Even if you don't then change careers and become a DBA, you've learned something useful and interesting. it can be helpful to know at least a little bit about a lot of things. I know enough about 20 or so different topics to be dangerous in all of them. If you want it done properly, you get, well, properly. If you want it done, super well, you probably need somebody else who'll be faster. But if you want a little bit of back-end, a little bit of front-end, a little bit of database, a little bit of low-level driver, a little bit of DevOps work, a little bit of Kubernetes, a little bit of AWS, I can do all those things poorly, to be fair. Competently, but not brilliantly. And there is value career-wise, and this is my kind of last kind of piece of advice to people who find themselves now working. If you start finding yourself getting a bit bored, which happens, we all think, well, this is cool, but I've done the same thing for like a year and it's getting a bit boring. If you are a generalist, if you can do a little bit of everything, you can move around a lot more easily to other projects that look interesting. Somebody needs a little bit of help with the back end. Okay, well, I'm not an expert, but I know enough to give you a hand. Next month, turns out that our DevOps Kubernetes cluster isn't quite great. Okay, well, I'm not an expert. I know a little bit enough to give you a hand. Now, maybe I don't get moved to those teams, but I'm still keeping myself interested in the office. I'm getting interesting challenges. Interesting challenges are, well, good. And I think, okay, that was the last slide. This is just a disclaimer. Everything I've said is my opinion. Feel free to discard. My opinion is worth no more than anybody else's. But I'm hoping that having spent some time going through a whole bunch of painful lessons, some painful, some not so painful, at least some of the advice will be useful to people as you kind of continue your career. And that's everything I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom in 35 minutes. Questions? That's impossible.
Less a question and a comment on the last point. If you know a little bit about a lot of things, you also know enough to know who to ask about stuff. If you know a little bit about databases, you can say, hey, I think this is a problem in the database. Let's get the database person in and figure out if I'm right about that and actually try to solve the problem. And that I find that that's actually one of the most valuable things I do in the organization I work for, is that I know a little bit about everything, and that means that I can find the right people to talk to solve problems instead of beating my head against a brick wall for 2 weeks because I don't know that I need a DB person.
That is an excellent point I wish I had thought to include. Thank you, Jeremy. You are dead right. There is a strong value in being able to recognize the shape of problems. So we move slightly over here. So you get better feedback from here from the microphone. There's a strong value in being able to recognize the shape of problems. Even if you don't know how to solve the problem, you know, as Jeremy says, it's a database problem. If your problem just says, like I used to get from the factory, I used to get a phone call to say, it stopped working. Well, that's very helpful, thank you. Which it are you talking about, and what isn't it doing? But if they phoned me and said it looks like the little hydraulic lift isn't coming up or down, I could have a rough idea of how to diagnose. The same is true in kind of software. If you can recognize roughly the shape of the problem, it's much easier to be able to at least get some help with it, if not fix it yourself. Probably don't fix the production database problems yourself. David had one.
Thanks, Kim. So your topic reminded me of the conversation around imposter syndrome, and I was just curious what your thoughts are in terms of just like dealing with it and pushing back against that overwhelming feeling of, imposterness.
I've come back to the screen because that link from Ned Batchelder's blog, if I recall correctly, has got a lot to say about that topic. Imposter syndrome is normal. It is perfectly reasonable to think, holy cow, I don't know what I'm doing. And that is probably true for a lot of the time, if you're a relatively junior chap or if you're a relatively senior chap. I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, here is the really fancy-looking design pieces of our website. It doesn't look right. Please help. My design skills peaked in 1995. Tables, columns, rows, up and down, done. I can't help you with that. I would think, holy cow, I don't know what I'm doing. But I would have the confidence to know that I can figure it out. And that is the thing to be said about imposter syndrome. You're not wrong that you feel you don't know what you're doing. Neither necessarily do the people around you. The senior guys around you, if you give them something they haven't worked on before, they feel the same imposter syndrome, they feel the same, no, okay, they probably don't feel the same imposter syndrome, but they feel the same, I don't know how to do this. But what they've got is a confidence and from experience to say, I can figure this out. And the solution to imposter syndrome is to think, yes, I know I don't know what I'm doing, but 6 months ago when you asked me to look at this other thing, I didn't know what I was doing and I know it now. 3 months before that, you asked me to look at some other thing, I didn't know what I was doing, I knew it now. There is no reason to suspect, and we're all logical kind of people, you kind of have to be to do this for a living. There's no reason to break the logic that says, I didn't know what I was doing, I got it right X times. Why would X plus 1 be different? We learn all the time. But we have to be, A, we have to be open to learning all the time, and B, we have to realize that learning all the time is fine. It's what we're supposed to be doing. Is that kind of what you had in mind? Cool. Is that David, yeah?
My question's a bit left field, but you might have an answer, and if you don't, it's in the advice that you see given to developers coming. Is there anything that comes across as bad advice, things that you hear people are told that you'd rather recommend to say, hey, ignore that when you hear it?
The one specific thing that comes to mind is developers are often told, particularly if you go the bootcamp route or something like that what you need to really know is exactly how to use